coming into this year, I think the Chiefs, same way they did last year, I think they have a very strong hold, being the leaders in this. And for the Chiefs to lose the division, something like very serious has to happen.
Yeah, this Chiefs team, I mean, obviously they won the Super Bowl, but they're still really good. Now, we can talk about a couple questions about the team, but really it just comes down to the fact that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid is just a winning combination. They're going to continue to be. Travis Kelce is still the best tight end in the league by a wide margin. And really, when you start with the offense, I mean, there's other guys we can talk about, but it starts with those guys, and that's why they're going to continue to be such an electric offensive unit. So I guess it's not worth talking about Pat Mahomes really. So we'll skip over that because I guess we're trying to talk about some interesting topics. Unless you have any takes on Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce.
No, I mean, I think they're the best in the league at their positions. There's
Yeah,
not much to say about
pretty
them.
much. Yeah, exactly. So I guess we can start with the fact that this receiver room is a total question mark, but that doesn't mean I think it's going to be bad because we
Mhm.
saw them just win the Super Bowl last year with a similar receiving core with similar talent. Now, I guess you can say losing Juju, who is an established veteran, he was kind of that number one receiver who maybe wasn't elite, but he was established. Maybe that's a step back, but I just believe in Pat Mahomes enough that one of these receivers is going to wind up having a great year as a number one receiver for this team. I just don't know who it's going to be.
The only like established player, I guess, would be MVS. Kadarius Toney easily on paper should be the best player on this or the best receiver. Sorry, not the best player. But he's kind of like up and down sometimes. But I think MVS is probably like their most consistent guy because I think ever since he got to the Chiefs, I
Isn't
think
that a damning statement?
I think he's improved upon the drop issues he had with the
Yeah.
Packers. It's like I mean, you were a Packers fan, you can attest. Like when he played good, he was good. His problem was he was also kind of inconsistent. So I think he's kind of leveled out. And although he's not like dynamic the way Tyreek Hill was, I think he gets the job done in terms of like stretching the field. I think Sky Moore hopefully should continue to improve this season. I'm a big Sky Moore fan, but that's just because he wears number 24 as a wide receiver, and I just think that's fun. So
Okay.
I don't know how you feel about Sky Moore because I know he's kind of like a hotly contested thing. So what do you think about him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm once again, like as I always say, I'm not a huge college guy, so I wasn't too familiar with him. I just thought coming into last season, I wasn't really that disappointed with him. Now, I didn't remember that he had 3 fumbles, so I guess that could have been part of his reason for his playing time inconsistencies. But outside of that, when I saw him making plays, like I thought he filled his role on a Super Bowl caliber team as a rookie pretty fairly. I mean, when you have Juju, MVS, they traded for Kadarius Toney, and I might be neglecting one other person who was on the team last year, but I thought Sky Moore was McCole Hardman. I thought Sky Moore, for a young guy who had similar skill sets to a lot of those players, but it was less experienced, I thought his role was fair. So you would expect this season as maybe the year he takes a leap. Now, I was really encouraged to see Rashee Rice, their second round pick this year. So I didn't understand why Pat Mahomes was playing preseason, but I did notice that there was at least one game where Rashee Rice in the preseason had 8 receptions in the first half of a game with Pat Mahomes throwing to him. So I think that's notable just from the fact that it wasn't Blaine Gabbert in the preseason. It was literally Patrick Mahomes thrown to this rookie guy. So that would make me a little encouraged to say like maybe he can be the number one receiver in this offense because I want to see Kadarius Toney succeed, but the guy is very injury prone and he has yet to put together a full season. So if I had to make a prediction right now, Rashee Rice, but to your point, Sky Moore coming in a year two is also a name to watch because he does have a little leg up on experience there.
No, I definitely agree. I was a big fan of the Rasheed Rice pick. I know a lot of people, they say he's a little raw because he's coming out of SMU, a smaller school. So I totally understand all that. But I think when you're coming into an Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes offense, like that's really going to help boost your development because you're working with some of the best so they can help you really get to where you need to be. And I really like the skill set he has. Me personally, I assume Mahomes played because they wanted to get him, chemistry working with the receivers. So I think Rasheed Rice, like if Kadarius Toney continues with the inconsistencies and the injury problems, I think Rasheed Rice could easily replace him in the starting lineup. And of course, can't forget Justin Ross. A lot of people love him. I kind of like him. I think people forget he was considered like a really top end talent.
Yeah, I would love to see him succeed. It's just he's competing with all these other young guys who are, more fresh, haven't had the history he's had. It's going to be an uphill climb for him, but I do see him being on the roster. I feel like they're going to want return on the investment there. And then one other guy too is Richie James they signed from the Giants. So I mean, a good veteran in there as well. He can do some punt returns and stuff like that, but I don't really see him taking MVS's spot as the main like deep threat. You mentioned MVS earlier a little that he got a little more consistent. I thought that MVS in the playoffs, he really stepped up, but I don't think they want to count on him all the time for that. So hopefully these young guys are ready to go for a playoff run. I don't know how I'm feeling about a Super Bowl pick right now coming out of the AFC. My brain is telling me to pick against the Chiefs just because I don't know. Like to me on paper, Chiefs Eagles is the most logical Super Bowl pick,
Mhm.
but like there's never rematches. It's not the NBA. The NFL is a very variable sport, and part of me thinks the Eagles are gonna dominate the NFC come playoff time. So that kind of makes me think the Chiefs might succumb to the Bengals or Bills come playoff time. Finally. Well, actually, the Bengals beat the Chiefs 2 years ago, so I guess it's not impossible. Just, I guess these receivers, it comes down to the fact that you look at Cincy, they got Chase and Boyd and Higgins, and mixing out of the backfield. It comes down to is Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce just going to continue to be so elite that they can continue to make these deep playoff runs, or is this young talent going to hold them back at all? I'm not quite sure, but when you have Pat Mahomes at quarterback, you would assume some of these guys are going to be able to step up. So, with that in mind, what do you think about the run game as well? Because the Chiefs have obviously, with Pat Mahomes, with Kelsey being on the team, they've taken a step back from the run game. It hasn't been so much emphasized, but they still have players who've performed well, especially come playoff time during that Super Bowl run.
Hopefully, they're gonna try to lean more into the run game again because I think we saw a lot, like, sort the end of the year, Isaiah Pacheco, he got a lot better, considering he's like a seventh round draft pick, considering he proved himself a capable starter for this team, at least, in the way they do run the football. I think they should at least try to lean on it a little bit more so they can try to get other, like the young players like Rashee Rice and Sky Moore more acclimated in the receiving game. And I think if they can do that effectively, I think that's going to be good for like the team development as a whole because the Chiefs, I don't want to say one dimensional because they're very good at what they do. They're not one dimensional in a bad way, but they're very pass heavy. If they try to lean more on the running game with an established starter in Pacheco, who at least can manage their offensive run game well, I think that should help them, help keep opponents a little bit more off balance. So hopefully that kind of works out for them that way.
For Pacheco, I feel like he's gonna pretty much be the same player he was last year. I don't see him as a guy who's going to be, rising into stardom, but that's just by design, and that's perfectly fine. The fact that he's this good as a seventh round pick out of Rutgers is a huge win for this team. And Jerick McKinnon, at age 31 or 32, whatever it was, he came alive completely down the stretch last season. I think he had like 8 touchdowns through his last 8 games, something around there, and he was a big part. But he's kind of just a role player for sure. So I don't really see him taking a leap either. I kind of see him being the same player. Like the run game's going to be the same. I guess it comes down to how much can other teams get the Chiefs to have to lean on that run game. It doesn't really seem to ever happen. I mean, they still have Clyde as well as a depth piece. I mean, that was a guy who's a first round draft pick has played well for them at points. So I think they have enough talent to get by and play the type of offense that Pat Mahomes wants to play.
As long as they try to use it just a little bit more to just, kind of keep things a little more fresh with the offense, I think that's only to their benefit.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then looking at the offensive line, the interior of Joe Tunney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith is all back, but they have 2 new tackles with Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor coming in, with Orlando Brown out. And who was their other tackle last year? It wasn't Mike Remmer still, was it?
I think, was it not
Andrew Wiley, right?
Wiley? I thought it was Niang also not a starter for part of the year?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, Niang's still here. He's listed as a backup. So maybe they're just kind of demoting him with Smith and Taylor coming aboard. But what's your thoughts on that change to the O-line? I mean, Donovan Smith's getting older, but he's also been around for a while.
I mean, I'd say their offensive line is probably one of the better ones in the league. I think, Thuney and Smith, I think they're very good at the guard position. Humphrey is pretty elite for a center. Jawan Taylor, he's pretty up and coming. I think believe he has a few injury problems with the Jaguars, but he was pretty good when he played. I think like the weakest link would be Donovan Smith because he is getting a little older, but like he's a veteran, he gets the job done. I think they should be okay for the most part starting him. And if anything, you do have young guys like Lucas Niang in the background as well. Like he can
Yeah.
also just come in if anything happens. So I think their offensive line is pretty good. I think it's a lot better than from the Super Bowl versus the Bucks. I think they improved it this year, so I don't see why it should be an issue this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think they made that a priority after that slacking that Tampa gave them. So I think they've done a really good job. And part of it was just drafting, and it goes to show how good the front office has been with Brett Veach. I mean, Trey Smith, they nailed that pick, and then Creed Humphrey as well. Obviously, he was drafted a little higher, but overall, they've just made a lot of good moves. So they've really solidified it. So not too much to question about this Chiefs offense. It's really just like we were saying, kind of more who's going to be the main guy, but we think one of those guys will get there because it just has to happen with Pat Mahomes. Yeah. So looking at the defense, once again, like it's never elite, but it doesn't really have to be. It just has to be good enough to support the offense. And that's what it was last year. Now, I guess the big story is Chris Jones and his potential holdout because he wants to be paid like the elite defensive tackle that he is. And he is deserving of a big contract extension. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But the rest of that D line, I think, is pretty good. And really across the entire defense, you could argue the secondary has some questions, but I think it's more just an up and coming secondary, but you would hope that they can put something together.
No, I agree. Karloftis, Nandi, Jones, and then their I don't know how to say this guy, Charles Omenahu. I mean, like that's a pretty solid defensive line. Karloftis, I think he wasn't like super standout as a rookie, but I don't and ever remember a point in the season where people were like, he's not coming along the way he's supposed to. Chris Jones and Derek Nandi at the defensive tackle positions, they're pretty consistent. Chris Jones is one of the best D linemen in the league, so I understand why he wants to be paid as such. Even though he's already being paid as such as well, so it's kind of like it kind of puts the Chiefs in an awkward situation because that's a lot of money, but he's definitely worth it. So I understand why he's holding out. I mean, I think their D line's pretty solid. It's about the same as last year. So I don't think they should decline at any point unless Chris Jones isn't playing. But I like their front seven. I think the linebacking core also is pretty good. I don't know what you think about like the additions they made. I kind of like them because I remember last season we were talking a lot of smack about like how bad their linebacking core was, and I think they improved it this year.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Bolton has really broken out early in his career as pretty much the leader of that linebacking core. But Willie Gay has been good when he's played. He's had a couple injury issues, but I think he's going to get back on track. And then Drew Tranquil was really good for the Chargers last year. I didn't realize how impactful he was on the stat sheet last season. I was looking at some of his numbers. So I think that's an underrated pickup.
I agree
Yeah.
with you. I think the Tranquil signing, it's not like world shattering, but I think he's going to get the job done. It's a lot better than whoever they had as a starter last year. So I think it's a good move by them.
Yeah, for sure. And then the secondary, once again, it's kind of a lot of young guys. Trent McDuffie missed a lot of the early part of last season, but when he came back, he kind of solidified the cornerback room for the Chiefs and helped them go on that Super Bowl run. Justin Reed, they signed him from the Texans 2 years ago. I think he's really filled in well since he's arrived. Also trying to give Harrison Butker some competition at kicker, apparently. Once again, we saw him kicking some extra points in preseason. L'Jarius Sneed as well is kind of put himself on the radar, so maybe he'll take a step up this year. So it really comes down to, I guess, Brian Cook at free safety. He was a rookie last season, mostly operated as a backup. So we'll have to see if he's able to fill the void Juan Thornhill left. But Juan Thornhill wasn't exactly one of the strong points of this defense, so maybe Brian Cook will be able to step right into that role.
When he played last season, I don't think he was that terrible. I think obviously, he had growing pains and stuff like that. He got picked on a bit in the Super Bowl. But I think at the end of the day, Juan Thornhill, although he had a pretty explosive start to his career I believe he was a second round rookie, just kind of never was able to recover. So I think they're fine moving on from him. I like Sneed. I think Sneed, as the corner number one last year was pretty decent, all things considered, after Travarius Ward left.
Yeah.
I think Trent McDuffie, I also really like Trent McDuffie. I really like the Trent McDuffie draft pick because I thought they really did need to solidify their corners, especially. So I think he's going to continue to show out this season. I think he played pretty good in the Super Bowl, all things considered. So I think that's pretty interesting. But yeah, no, I like their starting DBs. I think although they're young, they should definitely be pretty good if things continue to improve as they continue developing as they seem to be.
Yeah, even Jalen Watson as well. He had that major pick six, so that's what everyone kind of recognized him for. But he wasn't terrible either as a late round draft pick. So yeah, across the board, the Chiefs are the Chiefs, and I don't see them losing the division. Even though the Chargers, I know they're loading up. We can talk about them right now, I guess. It's hardly a controversial prediction, but the Chiefs are
Yeah.
probably going to win this division.
No, I definitely agree.